Disney wasn't the first to make an adaptation of the classic fairy tale Beauty and the Beast, but I think it's settled science that the 1991 animated film is considered the pinnacle of the story's many versions. But Disney, not content with having achieved perfection, decided to make a live-action version of their glorious animated film in 2017. To put it mildly, people had some questions. For instance, why would you tell the same story with worse effects, a longer runtime, and a flat, unimpressive bell? To say nothing of the useless romantic subplot between sentient furniture. Why would the few changes you did make to the script be specifically centered on making the film
updated for modern audiences?
Most pressingly, if you wanted to cash in on name recognition to assure box office success, why wouldn't you flex your creative muscles and come up with a new spin on an existing story? For instance, a mashup between Beauty and the Beast, Dracula, and general European lore. As luck would have it, such a book already exists, and we're going to review it today. The Kingdom of Forgotten Curses by A.R. Kaufer is the first in my Replace Disney series of reviews. You see, there's a whole cottage industry here on YouTube of creators who will make video after video of whatever pile of trash Disney has most recently produced, ignoring the ever-growing body of more impressive work by independent creators. But I'm out to see if examining good books instead of bad movies, especially those that can be reasonably compared to Disney, might also get a few clicks. I also want to get the message out to the world that actually no, you don't have to consume garbage just because they have the biggest marketing budgets. I want to take the work out of finding the good stuff. The Kingdom of Forgotten Curses starts out almost identically to the original Beauty and the Beast. A seemingly kind and doting father goes to a mysterious castle on an errand for the king and plucks a rose from the castle garden, wanting to give it to his favorite daughter, Beauty, called Bellamina in this book, or Mina for short. Sound familiar? The master of the castle doesn't take kindly to this and throws the man in his dungeon, only releasing him when the man's beautiful daughter pleads to be taken in her father's stead. All of this sounds familiar, but the devil's in the details. The master of the castle is Drake, a vampire, not because he was born that way, but because he was cursed to be that way. Instead of a beggar woman asking to be let into the castle as respite from the rain and cold, like we saw in the iconic stained glass window intro of Beauty and the Beast, the book's fairy enchantress comes to Prince Drake's party disguised as a female soldier of the enemy army. The woman is ragged, she's bleeding on the floor, and she comes under the banner of peace, asking for care for her injuries. The prince not only refuses, but orders her imprisoned, and the fairy reveals herself, cursing the prince to be a vampire, one specifically who is repulsive to look at. His servants are likewise cursed. If he doesn't find someone to love him completely and of her own free will by his 100th birthday, he will stay that way forever, and his servants will turn to stone. Weird how the servants get a worse punishment than the rampaging warlord, but whatever. The stakes are high for Drake, so he has an ulterior motive for allowing Mina to take her father's place. How lucky he is that this drop-dead gorgeous woman just basically falls into his lap and offers to stay with him. But he can't help himself from being a dick. Specifically on her first night there, he sets up all kinds of ridiculous rules where she has to make small talk and not ask to leave, and she has to wear some slutty dress for some reason as punishment for not doing as he says. And then he just flat out starves her and makes Mina look at a table full of delicious food but is not allowed to eat it until she can be civil. Like she's the asshole here. Sir, we live in a society. And I would like to point out to all of you that he is doing all of these shenanigans in clear view of all of the servants who are going to be turned to stone if he doesn't get his act together and make this girl fall in love with him. So that's a great boss, right? Now, since we're comparing this to Disney, I know what you're expecting. You're expecting Mina to whip out some girl boss sass and put Drake in his place and maybe even start like a sword business or something. You know, something tough. But you would be wrong. Mina is a lady of her time who channels gentle, feminine energy, the type that Disney has decided doesn't count anymore for some reason. Specifically, her family is upper class, the kind that is directly adjacent to nobility. And just like in feudal Europe, there are very strict rules for how you behave based on your gender and based on your social class. Mina abides by all of these rules flawlessly and expects, foolishly perhaps, that Drake will as well, since he is a prince. Which is weird because she already knows from personal experience that just because a man is a lord doesn't mean that he acts that way. There is no Gaston in this book. More's the pity. But there is Gustav, about whom I have feelings.
I just want to talk to him.
Wait, why do you have a shotgun?
I just want to talk to him.
Dad, this is ridiculous.
I just want to talk to him. I just want to talk to him. I just want to talk to him.
It is not his fault.
I just want to shoot him. I just want to talk to him.
You can't shoot him.
Now, as it turns out, in this fairy tale kingdom in which the story is taking place, there are some weird, obscure rules that prevent you from taking hostages. You can't actually just hold a girl against her will in the castle. So weird, I know. In the original fairy tale, this wasn't brought up because in feudal Europe, if you had an army and if you were rich, you could kind of do whatever you want. You know, so there's that. But in this case, there are rules and they do have to obey them. So at first, it's somewhat refreshing when Gustav shows up at the castle. Even though Mina has been there for a couple of days, she's managed to see both Drake's insufferable qualities as well as the soft underbelly that he only shows occasionally. And usually after she hurts herself or is in some other pitiable state, then he drops the guard a little bit and allows us to see that he's not a complete prick. But then in fine, brooding leading male fashion, the walls go back up again and he's a dick again. So Gustav is a constable and he shows up to rescue her at the bidding of her father, the father who exchanged his freedom for his daughters. Great news, right? Apparently not, because Mina starts insisting that she is there of her own free will. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here helping my friend with his library, that's all. I'm not being held hostage. What the hell is this? We have to ask, is this some weird sense of honor? Is this poor tactics on the author's part where we're supposed to just believe that she's already in love with him even though all of her actions tell us that she's not? Is this some weird masochistic way of punishing herself for this sin that she's committed in the past that she's alluded to but she hasn't told us about yet? We don't know. Why won't she go with Gustav? We don't know at first, I should say. Finding out what went down and exactly what she hates herself for and is kind of punishing herself for makes it very clear why she flips out and so violently rebuffs Drake's advances even after she starts having feelings for him. Which brings me to the great strengths as well as weakness of the book. A cursed vampire, a traumatized woman. This makes for great chemistry and a lot of romantic back and forth, especially since Mina is allowed to go back to her house to visit her family periodically, even though she's still being held hostage. However, there's so much back and forth, and Mina is so led by her emotions instead of anything resembling common sense that you kind of start to understand why Marius, her father, is kind of a control freak and just decides on her behalf what she's going to do. It's something a little more than patriarchy, as we're coming to see. It's just this genuine belief that she is not capable of taking care of herself. And the more she vacillates back and forth, oh, I love you. Oh, no, I don't. Oh, I couldn't possibly be with you, but I can't live without you. You kind of start to see where Marius is coming from. And I don't think that was the author's intention. For instance, Mina knows that Drake is a vampire. He told her, like to her face a couple of times, I am a vampire. I drink blood. Yes, I do. You see, when we sit down at meals, you eat food. I drink from a cup. That's what we're doing here. She also knows from working on his library with him that he is related to Vlad the Impaler. Vlad Tepes, yes, Dracula. He is in this book. Yes, he is. She knows that. She knows that he loves her, and she has witnessed with her own eyes that his behavior has changed because of his love for her over the course of her quasi-captivity. All well and good. But here's the thing. Shortly after walking out on her family and basically turning her back on her whole old life, she finds out that he's Vlad. He's not related to him. It's him. And she says some wildly fucked up shit. Okay? There are some things you can't take back. Young ladies, when you get into romances, I understand that it feels like texts don't count, but they do. And there are some things you can't take back. Be mindful what you say. And Mina just said some things that I would have held against her longer if I was Drake. She also storms out on Drake. So she's turned her back on her family. She can't go there. And now she's turned her back on the man that she left her family for. And where's she going to go now? Did she even think about that? No, she didn't. Poor decision making. But the good news is that kind of runs in the family, or maybe it's not good news. Maybe it's bad news, like some bad genes going on there. Her father, Marius, turns out to be of epic proportions, also making bad decisions just all over the place. So keep in mind, all of this started because of Marius, all right? He allowed his favorite daughter to exchange herself for him to be some horrifying monster's hostage, okay? He said yes to that. Then, when her captor allows Mina to come and visit her family as a gesture of goodwill, and she says very clearly, I have to be back by dawn. And Marius is like, oh, okay. He knows that this man is not to be trifled with, but what does he do? He prevents Mina from going back. Twice this dude does this. The first time, there's just a little temper tantrum, whatever, we get over it. The second time, Drake's like, oh, you want to play with me? That's fine. So guess what? He takes one of Mina's sisters back to his castle and says, yeah, you can't have her back until you give me Mina. That was the whole deal. Sorry. So Marius relents. He lets Mina go, but then he disowns her. He disowns her like any of this is her fault. Sir, the audacity. To avoid giving spoilers, as much as I would love to go into the whole rest of the plot, I will just say that this particular version of Beauty and the Beast isn't just about the love story. It also involves family. Disney loves to have their orphans, and the orphan is also an only child. They just love that. You know why? Because when you're dealing with siblings, when you're dealing with parents, when you're dealing with community expectations, you're not just some outcast living in a swamp a la Shrek, okay? There are people who rely on you and love you and care about you and have input into your life. That creates complications. And that is not forgotten here. There is a consequence for every decision for Mina. She doesn't just get to follow her heart. Well, I mean, she does, but, you know, there's fallout from that. So the question remains, can the Kingdom of Forgotten Curses stand up to mainstream fare? The answer? Yes and no. Yes, in that this is a somewhat more grown-up version of the Beauty and the Beast story. I feel comfortable saying that 16 and up can read this book. Maybe a hard 16. It depends on what family you were raised in. But, you know, for today's youths, I would say 16 and up is okay. My main complaints about the book were largely because of the genre and not because of lack of skill on the author's part. Romances as a rule exhaust me. I've talked about this in previous videos. I prefer romantic subplots rather than the romance being the star of the show, and it very much was in this book, which left me annoyed in some places. Again, it's not a quality issue. It's just like, girl, get yourself together, for heaven's sakes. There is a reason I met and married my husband within 4 months. I have no tolerance for nonsense. I want your credit score, and I would like your treatise on how you will be the spiritual leader of our family. Go. I am not joking. Another important aspect to remember is that this is a proper fairy tale romance, which is a different kind of vibe than other types of fantasy. For instance, if you're dealing with high fantasy, or even if you're dealing with some kind of urban fantasy, there's going to be a lot more in-depth world building. Here, it's kind of a glossy sheen. This isn't a bad thing. It's appropriate for fairy tales. They tend to stay kind of high level, kind of like a satellite view of the world building. So again, this is indicative of the genre and not necessarily a quality issue. However, there were some plot issues that kind of had me scratching my head. For instance, the question of how Drake ever came to the attention of the king in the first place, which is why he sent Marius to go see him. He's fallen into legend, you said originally, because, you know, the curse happened, he fell out of favor, he fell out of power, and people think there's some, you know, prince in the woods, and he might be a fae or he might be a vampire, but he's largely legend. But the king sends Marius to go and ask about his taxes. That's not legend status. I wish it were, because taxes are terrible. Anyway, Marius was able to find his castle immediately and with no trouble, and so was Gustav when he went to go and see about bringing Mina back. So the whole, oh, he's fallen to legend thing and people aren't sure if he really exists, that doesn't seem to be the case, so it seemed a little bit of a case of contradiction there. Although in the author's defense, that exact same plot hole also existed in the live-action Beauty and the Beast, so I don't know what that's about. There were also some issues with pacing. I felt like some of the conflicts with Drake were a little rushed, where there was a huge blow up, either Mina being angry at Drake or the other way around, but it seemed to be resolved very quickly. So they would just be this huge, oh, I'm so done with you, I hate you so much. And then like literally 2 paragraphs later, it's like, oh, I love you again. And again, usually Mina was in some state of being pathetic, either, you know, physical frailty or just, you know, sobbing and fainting or whatever. And of course, you know, that just melts that cold old bastard's heart. You know, it wasn't poorly done. I just thought it was a little rushed. The final thing, and I never really got a clear answer for this, is upon discovering her father was being held by Drake, why didn't she run for help? We've already established, because of the presence of Gustav coming to get her, that it is actually illegal to kidnap people in this kingdom. You can't just do that like the feudal lords of, the time of the original Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. You couldn't do that in this world. But he did. So why didn't she run for help? She's personally acquainted with the king and the king's child. They think well of her. They think well of her family. Marius is their personal clerk. I can't remember exactly what his title was. But the family is known by the king. The king has an army. Why not just say, excuse me, some creep in the woods is holding my dad? Could we do something about that? That never occurs to her, and I'm not sure why. There are some things about her personality. Again, she feels like she needs to punish herself for something that happened in her past. Not her fault, but she takes the responsibility onto herself. She has confidence problems because of Gustav and his behavior. All of these are reasonable, but that doesn't, to me, translate to the decision of, please take me instead, creepy vampire man, instead of, hey, dad, I'm going to come back here with dudes with swords. That never really squared with me. So that's what I didn't quite vibe with. But speaking of vibes, the overall vibes of this book are, as the young people say, immaculate. This is exactly the gothic romance, very Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is this parade of chandeliers and brocade. It is gorgeous. The descriptions are fabulous. The characters and the way they speak, marvelous. Thank God we don't have any stupid Marvel quips. I appreciate you, A.R. Kaufer. And for those of you who are hardcore Dracula stans, maybe you'll be happy to know that we don't actually lean in too heavy into the Dracula lore. This is a proper Beauty and the Beast retelling, but just like little sprinkles of Dracula, more Easter eggs and call-outs than actually invoking the plot of the book. So for instance, we meet our friend Jonathan Harker. We see the Demeter, even though it's an inn and not a boat in this case, and the people who stay there did not meet a bad end, so yay. And of course, we also have the reference to Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. Oh, what a mess he makes. I also like the differing takes on Fae and vampire lore and how they kind of combine in the book. It worked really well. I liked it. Ultimately, this is an original take on a fairy tale, a strong romance, and an updated embodiment of the dream that every little girl has, that she will one day grow up to be somebody's queen. This crown is pinching my head so hard, you guys. It really hurts. The thing about remakes is that nobody wants a shot-for-shot reproduction. They found that out in 1996 when they remade Psycho, and it was just the same thing, only with Vince Vaughn for some reason. And they continue to find it out with every lame live-action cash grab that they do. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants to go see them. What they actually want is a slightly different take on the existing fairy tale that they all know and love. In this case, it's the tale of a woman's grace and femininity taming the savage heart of a man, seeing beyond his external feral qualities and finding love in the goodness within. That's the story. The Kingdom of Forgotten Curses accomplishes that core story, but then also adds in layers of different callouts, world building, and storytelling on top of that, creating something new out of something that was already there, which is what everybody wants in a remake. So if you like romances and vampires and huge expansive libraries that you personally are required to go through and categorize, a link to the book is in the description. That's all for this week. And until next time, take care and write well.